Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about how to use the rounded joint technique to create an arm using a reference drawing. Now this approach is best when you're trying to do a construction quickly. If you are fairly new to Moho, this is helpful because you don't need to know about all the different types of point bindings and things like that. You can do the binding is very simple, it's layer binding. You don't need to know about smart bones or how to use those, and it can be done very, very quickly. And also, once you have created this kind of arm construction, you can use it for any number of different characters. It's very easy to modify. It also has the advantage of the forearm can swing all the way over the upper arm, and that's not something that you can do effectively with smart bones. The disadvantage is it does have the rounded kind of appearance to the joint, to like the elbow, and so in that particular case, if you wanted more of an angular kind of appearance, you wouldn't want to use this technique. Also, as you have the arm, if you want the muscles to kind of bulge as the arm moves, you would use the smart bone technique instead of this one. And the other thing here is, if you look closely at her arm, it is not symmetrical. It's a little bit asymmetrical. And this one actually is better for simplified characters using a more of a symmetrical appearance. But again, once you have this, you can easily create other characters with it. So it's very fast for creating different characters. The other thing is, it's the same kind of technique that you'll want to use for the wrist and for the ankles if you have switch layers for the hands and feet. Now, in this particular method that I'm going to be showing here, it's also very good here. This one here that I'm going to show allows you to use this technique for reference characters that are not just with their arms straight up and down or out to the side. If you have characters that have arms straight up and down or out to the side, you can use the grid settings, but that really, there's a number of drawbacks with the grid settings, but for just any reference drawing, you can easily use this approach. And all that you need here in order to do that is a layer that I will refer to as the reference circle layer. And so I used to have, if you've seen any of my other videos, one circle for each joint, and that allows you to set up the bones very quickly, but it kind of looks ugly just to look at a whole bunch of circles. It just kind of doesn't feel artistically nice. And so here, really all you need to have is one single circle, but it takes a little bit more work to set up the bones, not too much. And we'll run through that whole process. So just a couple of quick things to know. Before you do this video, you might want to make sure that you understand, I assume that you know how to use Moho in general. You understand about layer ordering and switch layers and how to draw things and styles and that kind of thing. If you don't know those, you might want to look at some other videos, but I'll just show you the technique in general. So here I've already created a hand with switch layers. I call it the right hand. Now this arm here, I'm going to call that the right arm. That's really not necessarily the best name for it. I like that approach because this arm is on the right hand side, and it just was easier as I'm animating to think about the hand that's on the right or the hand that's on the left, even though that's really her left arm. But maybe a better name that I've seen other people use is the back arm or the front arm. So however you want to name it, but that's why you'll see right arm and right lower arm when I'm referring to this. Okay, so as I was saying, for the right hand here, I already have the switch layers already created, and we'll just show how to match them up, and I'm just going to turn them off for the time being. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing is, I assume that you've got your root bone and most of your skeleton already set up. Here I haven't actually put the bones on here, but you may have a skeleton that's already got the bones in there. That's fine. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to show you even if you don't have that. So now what I'm going to start with, a reference circle, because I'm going to start where is that shoulder joint supposed to be, so that I can put now that center of rotation for the shoulder, and I'm going to set up the centers of rotation for the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist. That's the first thing that's going to happen. So now as we do this, as I move this reference circle around, you might see that as I drag this around, I can see things. And you may have, if you go in here underneath Edit Preferences, there is a thing called Enable GPU. If that's not selected, I can actually see things more sharply, but as I drag this, you'll see that the background changes and the stroke is hidden for this reference circle. So actually, depending upon what you're doing, you will sometimes want the Enable GPU on, sometimes you may want it off. Now, your computer, there may not be an appearance difference, but on some computers like my computer, there is. So this reference circle, all it is a circle, and it has this a vertical line and a horizontal line, and those are just in there so that you can find the very center of rotation so that you can set up the bones properly. And the outside part is a stroke, so these lines are a stroke that matches the skin thickness or the outline of your character, and so that helps things to align very easily. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take this reference circle, I can drag it around, I've got this transform point tool selected, and I'm going to press Alt and just change the size of this to what I think is the appropriate shoulder size. I could look over here and compare however I want to do that. So I'm going to get to what I think is the appropriate shoulder size, and I'm going to then place it in the place that I think is the appropriate shoulder position. Okay, so once I've done that, that's where I'm going to start my bone. Okay, so here I'm going to go to the bone layer now, and I am going to select this upper torso bone called the chest, and I'm going to create a new bone here, and I'm going to start it right at that center, and I'm going to drag it off to about where the elbow should be. And I'm going to change the name of that bone to left upper arm. You can name it whatever you want. Or actually that one should be the right, because that's what I'm doing right. Right upper arm. Okay? Now that this bone is placed, that's where I think the center should be. If I want to get it exactly right, I can look and you know, is this circle in the right place? Who knows? So you don't have to line this one up, the first one, exactly at the point, because as you move this around, you know, you will match things up. But you can, the first one, you're just setting it up where you think is appropriate. Okay, that may be clearer when we get more into it. So let me come back to the reference circle, and now what I'm going to do, so I'm not going to move this bone position anymore, because I think that's where the center of the rotation should be. Now I want to do is find where the center of rotation for the arm is. And so to do that, I'm going to take this circle, and all that really matters is I try to find out where the center is. I don't care too much about the size, but notice the size is going to affect where the center is. So I want to go ahead and change the size of this to what I think the elbow size should be, whatever I think it should be. So if that's too small, I want it a little bit smaller than the shoulder, but where I put it now, I'm not going to try to match exactly the reference. Maybe I do want to match it, but exactly, I'm just using this as a reference. And so let's say I want it to be right here. Now I go in and I select that bone, and I'm going to align it so that it comes right into the center here. And your eye is actually pretty good at that. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but that's good enough right there. So now what we want to do is set up the next bone, and since this bone is selected, as I add the new bone, it will be parented here. And so I'm going to start here, right at that point, and I'm going to drag off that new bone. And of course I can change the size and line. It's going to wind up somewhere about there. And so now you see the center of rotation will be exactly where that reference circle is. Now I'm going to take that reference circle, and I'm going to do the same thing that I've done before, select the transform points tool, and I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to decide and do that, press Alt and change the size of it again to whatever I think that wrist size should be. And again, I will place it wherever I think that center of rotation should be. So I'm going to say that's good right there. And I'm going to select the bone layer again, and again make the end line up just right in that middle of that cross. And then I will add the last bone, which is the hand. Okay, and I should have named the other one, so let's go ahead and name this right hand. And let's select this other bone and call it right lower arm. Okay, so now my bones are set up relative to the reference drawing. So now all I need to do is to draw the arms. So just to let you know, I didn't show this before, but the layer order is that the upper arm is the furthest away, it's the lowest one in the order, and then the right lower arm goes on top of that, and then the hand goes on top of that. And in this particular case, I have the lower arm and the hand in front of the face, but the upper arm is behind the face and the torso. And in this case, the lower arm and hand will also go in front of the torso. Okay, so now let's construct the arms. And it doesn't really matter what order we go in, but since we've already just placed this reference circle here for the wrist, let's go ahead and do the right lower arm. And by the way, it's probably a good idea to choose a different color than yellow, since it's hard to see that when you are matching up your layer colors. So here I've got the right lower arm, and I've turned it on. There's nothing that's created in this point in time. Now you'll notice here that my reference drawing is not completely symmetrical. And so I'm not going to match this one exactly, because for this type of technique we really want to use symmetrical arms, because this, for example, the lower arm in particular may swing to this side, or it may swing in front of our torso, and so we want it to be symmetrical. And again, this is kind of more for the simplified characters. You use smart bones if you actually want a more asymmetrical appearance, or even a curved appearance. If you notice there's a little bit of curvature to her arm. So if you want to match that perfectly, then you would use smart bones instead of this technique. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the reference circle here and just show how we're going to construct this arm. It's going to be a total of 8 points, 3 on one end, 3 on the other, and then 2 in the middle to give it a little bit of shape, or a little bit of bulge there. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to select the upper arm, make sure that arm is selected. I assume that you also know about styles, so I'm going to make sure that the style for skin is selected. And now I'm going to just draw that arm. You don't have to have the Bezier handles showing up. You don't want sharp corners. You can have auto stroke and auto fill already selected, so we can go ahead and do that if you want. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to have a point in the middle here just to change the shape. 1, 2, 3. 1 in the middle, and then join it up, and there we go. So there's the basics of my arm. The next thing that I want to do in this technique, it's the easiest way to construct this is to have these 2 points that are near the end, not the very end point, but the 2 that are near, we want to have their curvature 0. Same thing for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the point selection tool, and I'm going to select those 2 and change the curvature. Click on this little angle here, and it becomes a 0 curvature. Going to do the same thing for these other 2 points here. Change the curvature to 0 curvature. So that's what I want for both the upper arms and lower arms. That's the general technique. And then we will adjust the Bezier handles on these endpoints to make it more round. But for right now, the other thing is that in this technique, the arm that's on top, or the segment, whether it's a leg or arm, that's on top, you don't want these points, the stroke here, to be showing up. So we will turn off the stroke there. So the stroke will turn off right there. And this point on this side, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to drag it down some. Okay? On the upper arm, it will be a half circle, but on the lower arm, we don't want it as a half circle, because this will kind of overlap and give some dimension to the character. Okay, so let's now tweak this curvature so it has a semicircle on there. So how do we do that? Let me go ahead and turn back on the reference circle. And the easiest thing that we can do is, just to make it really easy, I can click this workspace tool and I can rotate the workspace such that this bone is straight up and down. So I'm going to rotate that workspace, and I can zoom in a little bit and drag it down. Okay, so that this bone needs to look like it's straight up and down. This is not absolutely necessary, but this helps us. It makes it easy. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to make sure I've got right lower arm selected, and I'm going to control click with the transform point tool on, and I'm going to move this point so that it is about where this endpoint is. Do the same thing for here so that they're right across from each other. And then I'm going to take this last point and put it as if this line were continuing and touch this circle. So that's the position of the points. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to drag the Bezier handles out perpendicular to this line out to the edge where that point matches up. And so that gives us that nice perfect circular center. And I can play with that a little bit if I want, but that's with these are 0, and if they're perfectly across from each other, and then these Bezier handles are all the way, you'll see if you ever use the grid, that's what the result is. Okay? And so there we've got the curvature that we want. Now let's zoom out a little bit, and we're going to do something similar on this other end. So let's just go ahead and do it a quick guesstimate here of where things should be. Now on this one, I don't pull this point out because, again, if I do that, it would overlap the elbow section, and we don't want to do that. That's the whole point of this semicircular construction here. And also for the forearm, again, we are using this technique, and it's kind of a simplified one, so we want it to be a little bit symmetrical, really, is what we want. Okay? And so you might want to tweak this a little tiny bit, however you think works best. But you want to have a little bit of that symmetrical appearance. That's really what you want, because we're moving it to either side. Okay, so now let's go back to the reference circle now that we've got the wrist taken care of. And actually, let's go ahead and leave that there. I moved it a tiny bit, but that's okay. We can just align it back up with that center again, and you can see. By the way, since this is fuzzy, again, that gets back to this enable GPU, and if I turn off the enable GPU at this point in time, it's a little bit easier to see. I can turn off the reference drawing, and now it's really easy to see whether we're aligned here. Now, since I have that circle already in position and haven't changed its size, that's a good time to go ahead and do the hand so that we can match on that as well. So I'm going to go to the right hand, and now I'm going to turn back on my reference drawing, and I will go and let's go ahead and reset the view just so it's a little bit easier. And I'm going to go to the hand. I'm going to orient it, and again, once I have to do, go back to those enable GPU, and I'm going to draw that to about the right scale, move it in, so I want to scale it down a little bit to wherever I think that hand should be, whatever that size should be. Zoom in and match it. We're basically close. Now notice that the hand's not exactly the right size because it wasn't drawn specifically for that, and so I want to get the hand to the size that I think it should be and put it in here, and maybe I want to orient it more like the reference drawing a little bit, and I get it basically in the right place. Now what I want to do here is I want to zoom in, okay, and here I want to go back and change the enable GPU, and I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to turn off the reference drawing now, and now I can come in here, and on each of the different hands I'm going to drag those points. again, transform point tool, and I want this to come in and be basically tangent to this circle. Like that, and the same thing here. And so now, as this moves around, notice I could put it here. It needs a touch circle, but I don't really want to touch it this way. I want it to be kind of almost I'm doing tangent to the circle. And so now it will have a more natural appearance again, kind of tangent to that circle. And that's, now you can see why that you wanted this thickness to equal to the skin. All right, and so you'll do that for each of the hands to make sure that they're aligned properly and they're matched up here to the wrist. So that's how you do those switch layers. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to move this circle over and start doing the elbow. So again, the transform point tool is set up, and I will, make sure I select all the points first, and now I can transform them over, and I'm going to center it where I want it to be. Okay, I can turn on the reference drawing if I want. So now that it's centered, all we have to do is change the size. I press Alt and I change the size. I can either just go to match what I had here, which is fine, or I could bring up the reference drawing. So let me go ahead and do that and turn on the reference drawing and zoom out and see, does that look right? Maybe it's a little bit large, so maybe I'll make it a little bit smaller. Again, I'm not moving it because I want it at the center of rotation. So let's say there, maybe that's okay. Let's a little bit larger. It's up to you. It's our artistic thing. Okay, so now that you've got that placed, that's how you're going to match both the lower arm to the upper arm. And so let's go back to that lower arm, and all we have to do here is click on that point, control click, and drag, and again, here's that enable CPU. Yeah, kind of a little bit frustrating, but there you go. And so I can move that in here. It doesn't matter too much. It looks okay right now, so I don't know exactly why certain things are bluer and certain ones aren't. Okay, but you see, again, as we talked about, you could put it here, but that looks a little bit weird. You really want it kind of tangent there. Okay, and this one I can change the Bezier points however I want. Maybe a little bit off the center, a little bit further than the center, but not much. All right, and so that is the lower arm set up. We're not trying to match exactly what the reference drawing is doing, but close to it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the upper arm. So let's select the right upper arm, show it visible. We do the same thing as we did before, and that is make sure that we've got the skin selected. I haven't changed anything, so I know skin is selected. We can do the auto stroke and auto fill if we want. You don't have to, but you can show Bezier curves. And again, it's 3 points at one end. 1, 2, 3. 1 in the middle, and then 3 at this side. So 1, 2, 3 about, and then again 1 in the middle, and then match it up. And there you go. You've got your center. And again, remember, we select these 2 points and set their curvature to 0. And select the other 2 points. Of course, you could do a shift select and everything, but I'm just showing you the simple, easy way to do it. And set those curvature to 0. And then you want to, again, have this kind of a symmetrical appearance here. Control, so you're looking not relative. Now, you again got to stray a little bit from the reference drawing because you're really wanting it to be a little bit symmetrical with respect to the bone. Okay? So then we come in here, and again, we can go to the workspace and rotate it so that I can see that bone. And that's the real advantage over the grid, is because we had them at completely different angles for the upper arm and the lower arm. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom in, and let's see, does that look exactly straight? Maybe a little bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just help me. So I'm going to go and grab that point. Move it again equal to this rotation, the point of rotation. I'm going to turn off the lower arm, so it's just easier for me to see things. And I'm going to grab this point, and again, it should be tangent, as we keep talking about, and pull this one down. And now set the Bezier handles. Again, we go all the way out, and perpendicular to this bone. Okay, and so you can play with that a little bit. Okay, and there you go. You're done with that part. Okay, and if I turn off the reference circle and turn on the lower arm. Oops, excuse me. That should be right there. Now we can see if I go to the bone and we go here and start manipulating that bone. Oops, did we not bind? We haven't bound yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and bind. So we need to bind so that we can see that these actually work. So the easy way to bind for the right lower arm, it can't be really any simpler. We layer bind to this bone here. And for the right hand, we're going to layer bind to this bone here, the hand bone. And for the right upper arm, we layer bind to this bone. And there you go. It's that simple. So now we go back to the Kim Possible thing, and we can, the bone layer, and we can see that we can manipulate this arm. And you can see now that the bone works really nicely. Now, if we zoom in really close, I'm going to go ahead and turn, we don't need these bone strengths. It's not necessary for that. So I'm not going to worry about all of them right now, but you don't need them. But if you'll notice here, there's this kind of artifacting. Again, this is another one of those situations about the enabled GPU. With enabled GPU on, you see it, but it really doesn't show up in the final animation. So that's another one of those enabled GPU issues. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the workspace again. Okay, so now what we want to do, we want to make sure that, again, we're looking at this bone straight up and down. And now I'm going to go back to the reference circle, and we're going to finish up with that shoulder. So we take that reference circle, and we're just going to select transform points to. They're all selected, so we just move it up here. And we don't have to align the pluses. All we need to do is have these lines don't have to be vertical up and down. The reason they're not is because I've rotated the workspace. So you don't need to move those. You just need to know where the center is. And so I'm going to put that center somewhere right on that edge of the bone. And now I'm just going to align the shoulder. So I go to the upper arm, select that, and do what we've always been doing. Drag down to here, make sure it's aligned with this, and then drag out the points. Okay. And there we go. And then just make sure, again, that we're a bit symmetrical here. Okay? Maybe a little bit out, depending upon how, how thick you want that arm to be. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the workspace, reset the view. I'll go ahead and turn off the reference drawing. Let's zoom in. And I'm going to go ahead and, once again, go back to the Enable GPU and turn that off. I'm going to turn off the reference circle. And just go back to the bone layer. And just, oops, we didn't turn off the reference circle here. And now show you, there you go. There's the arm construction. And let's go ahead. Might as well go ahead and turn off this bone strength for these two things. Turn them off. I want them on for the torso because that's use flexi binding for that. But here I am. I'm just going to manipulate the arm, and you can see basically what it looks like. And as you move the arm around, and you can see you've got the overlap of the arm here. And most of the time, of course, you're not going to be zoomed in that close. So you can see, how the arm moves, and it's very easy construction. And easy to change and switch over. And again, it switches over. You can switch over the bone. Oops, sorry about that. I forgot that I'm not showing the key frame here. But if you got the key frame, I could just individually move the angles. But that is the technique for creating the smart bones. The rounded joint construction. So one other point now. See, now that I've done one arm, I can just simply copy those points over here and then just scale them a little bit. So all of the things that I did, creating the shapes and everything else like that, we don't have to worry about. It's very easy just to move it over and create the other arm as well. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm going to show another tutorial about how to use smart bones in order to create the other arm. Just as a comparison of the two. So again, that's the way to use the rounded joint construction and how easy that is. So enjoy animating and rigging in Moho and have fun.